all suture anchor. Remove the driver, which uncleats the sutures automatically. Set and deploy the anchor by pulling back on all the suture limbs and remove the guide. Next, insert and set a second double-loaded Why Not Pro Flex anchor. Why Not Pro anchors contract vertically and expand laterally to provide 360-degree form-fit fixation beneath the cortex. Then, remove one suture from each anchor. Next, use an arthroscopic ruler to obtain graft measurements. First, measure the distance between the two glenoid anchors, and then measure the length of the footprint on the greater tuberosity. Then, measure the distance between the anterior glenoid anchor and the anterior greater tuberosity footprint. Finally, measure the distance between the posterior glenoid anchor and the posterior greater tuberosity footprint. Transfer the measurements onto the AlloPatch HD, which is a minimally processed, high-quality, acellular human dermis allograft that is ready to use off the shelf in minutes. Leave a 3 to 5 millimeter border on all sides of the graft and trim to size. Using ConMed's red 8 millimeter dry dot cannula, pull one limb of suture from each glenoid anchor through the lateral portal. Pass the suture limbs through the AlloPatch HD, tie 5 stick knots on each limb, and trim the excess. Next, lightly fold the graft in half and use a grasper to assist with passage through the cannula. Pull on the free suture limbs to shuttle the graft onto the glenoid. Then, retrieve both stick knots and the other suture limbs. Use a knot pusher to tie knots that secure the allograft to the glenoid. Then, use the katana suture cutter to cut the sutures. Next, insert a double-loaded Why Not Pro RC with hi-fi ribbon all suture anchor near the articular margin and remove the driver. Set the anchor by pulling back on all the suture limbs. Then, insert a second Why Not Pro RC all suture anchor and set the anchor. Use ConMed Spectrum Auto Pass to pass all 4 limbs of hi-fi ribbon through the AlloPatch HD in a mattress stitch fashion. ConMed's hi-fi ribbon is tieable, flat, and 1.3 millimeters wide to provide broader compression. When passing is complete, tie knots medially. Next, insert the Argo Knotless broaching punch down to the depth mark. Then, load 2 hi-fi ribbon limbs from each medial anchor into the Argo Knotless anchor using the black threader tab. Insert the nose of the eyelet into the pilot hole and set tension as needed by individually pulling and cleating each suture limb onto the white suture cleat while applying counter pressure to the back of the driver handle. While holding the white suture cleat stationary, turn the blue handle clockwise to insert the anchor to the depth mark. Then, uncleat the sutures from the white suture cleat and also uncleat the 1 millimeter hi-fi retention ribbon on the back of the blue handle. Then, simply press the quick release driver button on the back of the blue handle and pull back to remove the driver handle. Next, insert a second Argo Knotless broaching punch and anchor. The extended peak eyelet helps reduce the risk of pilot hole misalignment, while the vented design may promote bony ingrowth. Finally, cut the suture tails to complete the repair. As an option, free suture can be passed through the surrounding cuff tissue and allograft to provide more coverage over the humeral head and link the allograft to the remnant cuff.
So that's an animation of the SCR. The anchors that we'll be using in the lab will be slightly different, but the concept is still the same. So
when you're looking at some of the videos that are online, you'll see some of them have a lot of suture management. They try and pass all the sutures all at the same time. When you're doing this procedure, it's best to think of it as just putting a patch on the back of the glenoid as the first step, and then once you have done that, it's really just a rotator cuff repair. So I'm going to attempt to just demonstrate on a model at the front here.
Chị ơi, cái sao đó. Và cái việc này hai cái việc quan trọng nhất là lo cái đường chỉ từ ra đường vô nhé. Chúng ta chú ý là lúc mình làm á, coi là cái đường chỉ mà để trùng một lỗ vô thủ nó rối dữ lắm nhé. Thành ra cái chú ý là mình phải kéo cái đường chỉ ra cái đường khác á, chứ không có lộn với nhau. Cái first step là lấy cái allocate gắn vô trong chỗ thì lúc đó là xong đó rồi đó thì cái đường phía ngoài cũng như là mổ sushi thôi nhé.
Okay, so with the SCR with this model, I've already put one anchor into the glenoid. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but you can imagine we've got a glenoid in here, and a glenoid in here, and then I've already pre-punched the holes for the repair on the human bed. So we've already got one anchor in, just to show you, you've got a curved guide, so you can move it around to get the right trajectory on the glenoid. Very important, obviously, not to come out through the front face of the glenoid. So just line that up. You can usually just give it a bit of a tap, just so it doesn't move. And then put it in, all the way in, all the way out. In with the anchor. Tap all the way home. Unclink the suture. Out with the driver, and then might be a bit difficult to see, but we just pull back on the sutures, and the ankle will ball up underneath the bone.
Cái bước này là có quan trọng nhé. Cái anchor nó vô rồi mà phải cắm nó lên, mà kéo nó lên thì cái đầu ở dưới nó mới mở ra được nhé. Nó mở được nó mới giữ được cái vị trí. Nhưng mà đừng có lo mà dở mạnh lên nhé. Nếu mà dở lại mà nó rút ra đó là hư rồi, phải làm được cái mới. Nhưng mà mình biết hư dễ hơn là mình chịu hư nhé.
Okay, so now I'm going to take one suture from each anchor. One suture from each anchor out through the working portal. Okay, and then we need to pass through our patch. So we just load.
Cái súng là cái súng đây pass cái suture nhé.
Just load the suture on.
Mấy anh em có dùng cái này lần nào chưa? Mấy có dùng cái này lần nào chưa?
Pull the trigger and pull through. So we've got one done.
You can use suture by hand, right?
Yes. And you can use
Không, nói thiệt là nếu mà không có cái súng này á, lấy cái từ khi mình bộ mình giống được máy đâu đi luôn, ok.
Often in the branch is really hard to use a full engage. So we have our two sutures. Ensure at this point when you're doing it arthroscopically, use a grasper just to go in and check and make sure your sutures aren't twisted at this point. And then we apply a stick knot. For simplicity, I'm going to tie the two together to shuttle it in, but you could do a stick knot as well, doesn't matter. And then fold the graft in half.
Để xem nó làm.
And you can just use this one. So normally we'd use a big grasper, but I'll just use this. And then usually get an assistant to pull on each of the sutures just to help shuttle it in. And push in. And then let go. And as we come in, you can see that you could shuttle the graft in like that. Once it's in, then just bring those out to cut and then just tie these two together. so. And then we just cut this off and then tie our 2 knots. Right, so we've got our two sutures, and then we can just tie them one at a time. So we go in, the suture management, take our other suture, we have our pair. A quick SMC knot. Press the knot. Running down, pushing in. Lock. And then we can cut. Run down. Side done. This one. Looping. Coming through your lateral border. Grab the other pair of sutures. Okay, so at this point, we've got our patch. Okay, so in the grasp, you can now see we've got our patch tied onto the glenoid anterior and posterior, and now we've effectively just got to do a rotator cuff repair. So I've already got the holes punched for the anchors. We put an anchor in 2 medium, what we can call medial cuff anchors, and then put them out to a pop lock into these 2 lateral anchors.
You've got a pretty light model, what you say what's up. Thì nếu mấy anh em làm khâu mấy cái xương ở trước thì sau khi mà gắn bên trong rồi bên lại cũng như bình thường thôi đó. Bây giờ tôi suy nghĩ là cái này cũng như là cái dân cân xương thôi.
So one minute to go. You can see on this model, if I move my hand out of the way, this is our working portal, but for suture management, we make these small incisions above, which will be a stab incision, just for suture management, because that makes it a lot easier to manage the sutures.
Sau khi mà gắn rồi đó, bắt đầu vào đó cô điều dưỡng giúp phụ mẫu của ta nắm sâu nhé. Đỡ lên, đặt cơ thể nó không có lên được, là cái cơ nó không có được nhé. Nó sẽ dằn bạn qua cảm biết rồi sao dám cái anh là phải nắm được cái đó nữa. Tức là thăm con dơ là bỏ cái dơ là không có tốt nữa, phải làm cái mấy cái anh thời nó có một cái trường chắc là thường xuyên phải nhỏ hơn, mà làm nó cái độ hoặc làm việc nó lớn hơn, hoặc làm giảm cái độ khác, là phải biết trước là nó không là không kịp. Mấy cái anh thời này rất là
So you can see now, if I just jump up a little, we put our 2 medial row anchors in. We've gotten rid of a few of the sutures because for simplicity we'll just do one pair, and then all we're doing is just passing the sutures through like we would a normal cuff repair. Grab our tissue, clamp, fire, bring out. Alright, so we've now got one pair passed. We'll dispose of the other one, so we'll just keep it to just one pair, but you could do 4 passes here. Again, for simplicity, we'll pull these out through the stag incision, so we're only working with one pair of sutures. Pass the second pair for the cut. This time I'll take a bit bigger bite because you probably want to be a little bit more medial than I was on the first one. And then unlike with the Argo anchor, this anchor is the pop lock. It's still a knotless anchor. We put the sutures through these little nitinol loops at the end of the anchor here. They're very hard to see, but we take one from each.
Đấy, một dây một bên nhé, một dây cái tiếp, một dây tiếp, dây thì cái tiếp, một dây thì cái sau nhé.
You can tie those medial row anchors if you want, or we can just do a complete knotless construct. So the pop lock is very difficult to see, but it's a bit hard to see the nitinol loop. There's a little threader, and then pull through. And then what we do is we hold this suture like a zipper and run down. I've already pre-punched, so I can go straight into the hole and tap, tap, tap until the anchor is flush. Then you can tension these sutures. So this blue and white suture we can tension to make sure that we're happy. And then this little red tab which is here, we push that out of the way. And then keeping counter pressure, pop, and anchor is fired under the bone. And then suture cutter and cut off. Passing through the little sutures through the anchor, which then allows it to be locked off under bone. So lining up into the hole, tap, tap, tap until it's level, laser lines level. Then we can tension each suture individually. And then once we're happy, again, sweep away with this little red tab and counter pressure and suture cutter. So I should have been a bit more medial with my medial row anchors. I should have been a bit more medial on the patch. I didn't take a big enough bite. So here, these probably should have come out through the patch about here. But that's effectively what we're going to try and do in the lab.